It was a typical fall afternoon in East Harlem. Cool breeze, golden sunlight, and the usual hum of subway chaos under Lexington Avenue. At the East 125th Street station, people were just trying to get through their day. One of them was a 31-year-old man aboard the Uptown 6 train. Maybe he was headed home. Maybe he just wanted some peace. But he was about to make a decision that would turn an ordinary ride into something disturbingly unforgettable. At around 4:30 p.m., the man did something risky. He moved between subway cars while the train was in motion. A little-known fact for non-New Yorkers: riding between cars isn't just dangerous, it's illegal. But still, people do it. Some for thrills, some for space, and apparently some for bathroom breaks. Yep, witnesses later said the man appeared to be defecating between the cars just moments before he fell. Yes, seriously. In one of the most densely populated cities in the world, he chose the gap between two moving train cars as his makeshift restroom. That's not bold, that's bizarre. Then, disaster struck. As the train was pulling into East 125th Street, he lost his balance, fell to the tracks, and was struck by the train as it continued to leave the station. The impact was fatal. He was pronounced dead at the scene. No chance to save him. The MTA and FDNY quickly confirmed the death, and a wave of confusion and fear spread across the platform. But wait, it gets weirder. Just 20 minutes earlier, in a completely separate incident on the very same platform, a 50-year-old homeless man nicknamed Frenchie emerged from the tracks, bloody, disoriented, and seriously injured. He had no idea how he ended up there or if he'd been hit by a train. Frenchie was bleeding from a massive gash on his butt, a broken pelvis, and other injuries. Somehow, he climbed back onto the platform like a subway war veteran. He was taken to Harlem Hospital, thankfully in stable condition. Two bizarre incidents: one station, one day, and, according to police, no connection. Just a tragic coincidence that had commuters and cops alike scratching their heads. The chaos wreaked havoc on the entire subway system. Northbound trains were rerouted. Passengers were trapped underground for nearly an hour, and frustrated riders poured into the streets. 17-year-old Angel Torres summed it up best: "I was scared." The man who died wasn't officially identified, but his story quickly spread online, not just because of the grim details, but because of how surreal it all was. It wasn't a fight, a push, or a robbery. It was just a man, a dangerous habit, and one tragically bad decision. Still, beneath the shock and social media memes, there was a human being, someone with a story, a past, and likely a family that loved him. Accidents like this are strange and haunting, but they remind us how fragile life is, and how quickly it can be gone. May he rest in peace, and may we all think twice before riding between subway cars. It was a quiet Monday morning in 2019. At the links at Sleepy Ridge Golf Course in Orem, Utah, the sky stretched wide, the greens freshly cut, and the world felt peaceful. That morning, 6-year-old Aria Hill was where she loved to be most, riding in a golf cart, laughing beside her dad. Golfing was their thing, just her and her father, Kellen Hill. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The swing was clean. It was supposed to be just another stroke, but something went wrong. The ball veered, unpredictable, merciless. It struck Aria in the back of her neck, at the most delicate place, the base of her skull. There was no time to understand what had happened. Kellen dropped his club. A scream rang out. The world around them, the silence, the morning sun, the trimmed grass, collapsed into panic. Emergency services were called at 10:25 a.m. Paramedics arrived quickly, but Aria was already slipping away. She was rushed to a nearby hospital, then airlifted to Primary Children's Hospital in Salt Lake City. Her family clung to hope, praying, pacing, willing her to fight. But by 9:25 that evening, Aria was gone. The blow had been too severe. Her father's hands, once steady and sure, now shook uncontrollably. How do you live with something like that? How do you forgive yourself for something you never meant to do? Aria's uncle, David Smith, stepped forward to speak when Kellen and his wife Tasha couldn't. His voice cracked as he described Aria. silly, spunky, the kind of kid who lit up every room she entered. She loved to play dress-up, to experiment with her mother's makeup, to boss around her younger brothers in the most loving way. Tasha later wrote through her tears on the GoFundMe page that Arya was creative, unique, and full of love. She said Arya's absence left a hole that could never be filled. The home was quieter now, unbearably so. Police ruled it an accident. No foul play, no negligence, just a moment that should have passed without consequence but instead carved a scar through the heart of a family. Lieutenant Trent College from the Orem Police Department called it what it was, a devastating tragedy. The golf course had never seen anything like it. Stephen Murray, the head golf pro, said that most golf balls never land anywhere near people. This was a freak incident, a rare, cruel twist of fate. The community didn't wait. Donations poured in, over $112,000 raised in days. People who had never met Arya offered words of comfort, prayers, and warm memories of their own children. Everyone wanted to help, to ease even a fraction of the unbearable weight the Hill family now carried. Arya's uncle, David, shared more about her in those long days of mourning. He spoke about her joy, how she had a way of making people feel seen, how her laughter made the walls of their home feel alive. She was a little girl, he said softly, but she had a big girl's heart. Her story is one that should never have been written, a story of a beautiful little girl, lost in a moment no one could have predicted, a moment that tore a hole in time, and yet her memory endures. Because love like Arya's doesn't disappear. It lingers, in the wind on a golf course, in the echo of a child's laughter, in the tearful whisper of a mother remembering the way her daughter called her name. She may be gone, but she is not forgotten. On December 22, 2021, Cheryl Grace Shoy Delphin Cabales, a 46-year-old mother, stopped at a Circle K gas station in Palm Harbor, Florida, to fill up her 2018 Honda SUV. It was just a normal, everyday errand, one that people across the world perform without a second thought. However, in a tragic twist, this routine task would end in heartbreak and chaos. As Cabales carefully began fueling her vehicle, a 66-year-old woman driving a 2006 Nissan sedan reversed her car into a nearby gas pump. The collision caused a violent disruption. The fuel dispenser was knocked off its base, and in the process, it toppled over, trapping Cabales between the pump and her own vehicle. Almost immediately, the gas pump ruptured, sparking flames that quickly engulfed the area. Inside the SUV were two of Cabales' children, aged 11 and 14. In a panic, the children scrambled to escape the burning vehicle, managing to free themselves from the inferno. But their mother was still trapped, pinned in place by the fallen pump, unable to break free. Desperate to help, they tried to save her, but the fire was growing too quickly, too intensely. As the flames licked at the edges of the SUV, their mother's life slipped away before their eyes. A glimmer of hope came in the form of 34-year-old Jared Pearson, a homeless man who was nearby when the explosion occurred. Pearson acted as quickly as he could, grabbing the fire extinguisher that was situated next to the gas pumps, trying to douse the flames and get to Cabales. He also managed to usher the children to safety, away from the growing fire and chaos. But despite his efforts, the flames were simply too intense to combat. The fire consumed everything in its path, and tragically, Cabales was unable to survive the horrific blaze. Pearson's bravery was commendable, but it was too late to save the mother of two, Cheryl Grace Shoy Delphin. Cabales was pronounced dead after being burned alive in the fire. Her family, heartbroken and devastated, now had to grapple with an unfathomable loss. A mother, a woman who had so much to live for, was gone in an instant, leaving her children and loved ones reeling in grief. As the months passed, the family struggled to understand how such a horrific accident could occur. In August of 2022, the family decided to take legal action, filing a lawsuit against multiple defendants. The suit targeted 13 entities, including Circle K Stores, Inc., and Shell Oil Company. The family's lawyers argued that the gas station's safety systems had failed miserably. Specifically, the device designed to stop the fuel flow in the event of a gas pump being damaged or struck by a vehicle wasn't functioning. Additionally, the Circle K employee working at the time didn't activate the emergency stop switch, which could have potentially halted the disaster before it spiraled out of control. The lawsuit sought accountability for the failure of the safety measures that could have, in theory, prevented the deadly fire. The tragic death of Cheryl Cabales left a lasting impact not only on her family, but on the broader community. It was a stark reminder of how something as ordinary as stopping for gas could turn into a life-altering nightmare in the blink of an eye. A family forever scarred by loss, an innocent woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a tragedy that left behind more questions than answers. It seemed like just another breezy Monday evening in Queens. The hustle of rush hour was in full swing, people slipping into their routine post-work zombie modes, earbuds in, eyes glazed over, and dreams of dinner dancing in their heads. Among them was 51-year-old Edward Leonard, bartender, friend, and all-around good guy, heading home after a day's work, likely thinking of nothing more than beating the crowd onto the Manhattan-bound F train. But Edward had no clue that this seemingly ordinary ride would turn into something far more horrific, and ultimately his last. At around 6:45 p.m. on May 15, 2023, Edward attempted to board the F train at the Kew Gardens Union Turnpike station. The doors were closing, but like many of us have done before, he made a last-second dash. After all, nobody wants to wait another 8 minutes, right? What happened next, however, was anything but routine. Witnesses say Leonard's clothing, or possibly even his arm, got caught in the doors just as the train began to move. In a moment of panic, he banged on the side of the train, trying to get someone's attention, but the conductor didn't see him. The F train kept moving, completely unaware of the human being trapped on its side. Edward was dragged roughly 60 feet along the platform. He got dragged by the train car, said Bernice Maitland, a horrified witness who had just exited the same train. I was frantic. I was crying. She later added that Leonard was still breathing when she saw him lying on the platform, bloodied, missing a shoe, and battered beyond recognition. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Edward Leonard was pronounced dead shortly after at Jamaica Hospital. The cause? Blunt force trauma. Now, here's where things start to get murky and truly bizarre. There were no surveillance cameras on that part of the platform. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Some said it was his arm. Others said it was his coat. One source close to the investigation claimed Leonard might have been intoxicated, while co-workers noted he was on medication for chronic back pain. The MTA immediately questioned the train crew and ran drug and alcohol tests, but no foul play or driver negligence was confirmed. The train was one of the MTA's newer models, the R160, known for improved safety measures. Yet somehow, it failed to register that a person was stuck in the doors. The MTA later reminded the public that subway doors aren't like elevator doors. They won't pop back open just because something's wedged in. In the wake of the incident, the MTA referenced their safety data. In 2012 alone, 141 people were struck by trains, 55 fatally. A pilot program had been proposed to install platform screen doors. Think of those glass doors in Asian subways, but it's unclear if that would have helped in Edward's case. What makes Edward's death so bizarre is that it wasn't a case of someone falling onto the tracks, or even intentional harm. It was something most New Yorkers have done at least once, trying to squeeze through subway doors at the last minute, and it cost him everything. Edward Leonard wasn't just another name in a tragic headline. He was a bartender at the Cambria Hotel in Chelsea, known for being generous to a fault. He would literally give somebody the shirt off of his back, said his close friend Judy Miller. He was a really generous man. And though the city kept moving that night, those who knew Edward were stopped in their tracks. He was loved, he was appreciated, and his death, strange, sudden, and senseless, reminds us all to slow down, stay safe, and never underestimate the ordinary moments that can shift into tragedy in a heartbeat. It was 2024 in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, a quiet evening that should have ended like any other. A family of 3 returned home after dinner, unaware their world was about to be shattered in the most unthinkable way. Jiao, the father, had been drinking earlier that night. Nothing unusual, just a few drinks, or so it seemed, but sometimes it only takes one wrong moment, one careless decision to change everything. While his wife, Wang Hang, went about the house tending to chores, she left their 6-month-old daughter in Jiu's care. The baby cried and cried, but Jiao, half lost in his drunken haze, didn't move. Frustrated and exhausted, Hang snapped at him, and suddenly things escalated. Words flew, anger flared. In the heat of the argument, Jiao stood up, cradling the baby in his arms. Maybe he was trying to prove a point. Maybe he was just trying to calm her. We'll never really know. But what happened next, no one could have prepared for. As he rocked his daughter gently near the living room window, 6 floors above the ground, his grip faltered, just for a second. But that second was enough. In a horrifying instant, the baby slipped from his arms and vanished out the window. Everything stopped. Hang screamed and bolted for the stairs. She found her daughter lying motionless on the cold pavement below. Jiao, now sobering fast in a state of pure panic, rushed down, scooped the tiny broken body into his arms, and sped toward the nearest hospital. But it was too late. Doctors tried, but there was nothing they could do. She was gone, declared dead on arrival. Hospital staff immediately notified the authorities. When police arrived, Hang accused Jiao of killing their daughter on purpose. She was grief-stricken, furious, maybe even in shock. Jiao was arrested on the spot, facing serious criminal charges. But as the investigation unfolded, the story took a twist. Jiao swore it was an accident. He said his hands were slick, unsteady, that he'd never meant to harm his child. He had no reason to lie. Earlier that very day, he had gone out and bought toys for her. And despite her earlier accusations, Hang later defended him. She told investigators he was often drunk, yes, but always tender with their daughter. After careful review, the court didn't find evidence of intent. His actions, though reckless and devastating, weren't driven by malice. The fact that he rushed her to the hospital, sobbing and desperate, told a story of a father in panic, not a killer. His charge was reduced. Instead of murder, he was convicted of manslaughter. The sentence, 4 years in prison. The verdict divided the public. Some were furious. How could 4 years possibly be enough for a man whose negligence killed his own child? They demanded harsher punishment, real accountability. Others saw it differently. They looked at Jiao as a broken man, already living a nightmare, haunted by the sound of that fall and the silence that followed. What more could the system do that life hadn't already done? But this wasn't an isolated tragedy. In recent years, similar stories have surfaced across China. In 2021, a 3-year-old girl died after being left alone in a hot car for 5 hours. No charges were filed. In another case, a father briefly left his 4-year-old daughter by the sea while he returned to his car. The waves swept her away. Her body wasn't found for 2 weeks. Again, no legal punishment. Zhao's case reopened a painful debate. What does justice look like when grief and guilt collide with responsibility and law? Legal experts like Zhang Xinan argued that children aren't property. They aren't disposable, and when a parent's negligence costs a child their life, there must be real consequences, not just sorrow and regret. The question lingers like a shadow over Jiao's sentence. Was it enough? Could any punishment ever measure up to the loss of an innocent child? Or was this simply one of those stories that reminds us how fragile life is? How one mistake, one drink, one outburst can destroy everything in the blink of an eye? There are no easy answers. Only a shattered family, an empty crib, and a haunting silence where a baby's laughter once lived. We all have our routines, things we do without a second thought. Maybe it's grabbing a morning coffee, taking a daily jog, or unwinding with a favorite TV show. For Peggy and Wendell Jones, their routine on July 25, 2023 was simple. Tackle the lawn at their investment property in Silsbee, Texas, and then head out for a fun night at the casino. It was supposed to be just another day. Wendell worked on the front yard while Peggy hopped on the riding mower and headed to the back. The heat was thick, the sky a bright, endless blue. Then, out of nowhere, something dropped from above. Something alive. A snake. A 4-foot-long, writhing serpent, falling straight from the sky like a nightmare made real. Before she could react, it landed on her right arm and coiled itself tightly around her skin. And it wasn't just hanging on, it was fighting. Peggy barely had time to process what was happening before the snake started striking at her face. Venom sprayed onto her glasses, missing her eyes by sheer luck. She flailed her arm, desperate to shake the creature loose, but the more she struggled, the tighter it gripped. At the same time, she had to keep control of the mower, all while screaming for help. But with the roar of the engine and the distant hum of highway traffic, her husband couldn't hear her. Then the second attacker arrived. A brown and white hawk appeared, wings spread wide, talons ready. It dived straight at Peggy's arm, grabbing at the snake, trying to snatch it away. But the snake wasn't giving up easily. What followed was a wild, frenzied battle, a tug-of-war between predator and prey, with Peggy caught in the middle. The hawk swooped down 4 more times, each attack more aggressive than the last. Finally, on the 5th attempt, it yanked the snake away, tearing it from Peggy's arm and soaring into the sky with its writhing prize. Just like that, the nightmare was over. But the damage had been done. Blood covered Peggy's arm, deep lacerations, claw marks, punctures, her skin torn apart by both snake and bird. Shaken and in pain, she finally managed to get Wendell's attention. The moment he saw her, panic set in. Without hesitation, he rushed her to the emergency room. Doctors cleaned her wounds, bandaged her arm, and gave her antibiotics. Physically, she would recover, but mentally, that was another story. Peggy couldn't close her eyes without seeing it all over again. The snake dropping from the sky, its fangs flashing, the hawk's talons ripping through the chaos. Sleep became elusive. Worse, her arm was left weak, nearly useless, making daily tasks a challenge. Thankfully, she wasn't alone. Wendell, along with their children and grandchildren, stepped up to help, making sure her wounds were cared for and that she never had to relive the nightmare alone. But the question remained, how? How does a snake fall from the sky? Had the hawk dropped it mid-flight? Had it been snatched from a tree, only to wriggle free, landing in the worst possible place? The odds of such an event seemed impossible. And yet it happened. Peggy's story wasn't just an unlucky accident. It was a chilling reminder that nature is unpredictable. One moment, you're mowing your lawn. The next, you're trapped in a battle between predator and prey, fighting for control of your own arm. Sometimes, the most terrifying things don't come from nightmares. They fall from the sky, unannounced, and change your life forever. It was a cool Sunday night in Queens, and for most people the weekend was winding down. School loomed ahead, and the city's heartbeat thudded steadily underground. For 2 girls, just 13 and 12, it seemed like a harmless thrill ride. A stunt, a moment of rebellion. They boarded the 7 train at Flushing Main Street, unaware that they were about to make their last stop. The 13-year-old, whose name was not released due to her age, was subway surfing. Yeah, you heard that right, subway surfing. That insane trend where kids literally climb on top of moving subway trains and run, or jump between cars, like it's some kind of IRL video game. Only there are no extra lives here. The girls clambered to the top of the train as it rattled westward through Queens. It's not clear how long they stayed up there, but as the train approached the 111th Street station in Corona around 11 p.m., things took a deadly turn. The train came to a stop, but the sudden jolt was too much. The girls lost their balance. One fell between the cars and under the train. She didn't survive. The other girl was critically injured, suffering head trauma and brain bleeding. She was rushed to Elmhurst Hospital and intubated, her fate hanging in the balance. It was a night that began with adrenaline and ended in tragedy. For their families, it was a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. And here's the thing, this wasn't even the first time. In fact, it was the 6th subway surfing death in New York City that year alone. Just a week earlier, another 13-year-old boy fell to his death while pulling the exact same stunt at the Forest Avenue station, also in Queens. It's become a horrifying trend, fueled by TikTok, Instagram, and the illusion that likes and followers are worth risking your life. What makes this case so bizarre isn't just the death itself, it's the fact that even after it happened, witnesses reported seeing more kids doing it again the very next day. Same station, same tracks, same game of chance with a train weighing hundreds of tons. Despite what the NYPD says about increased patrols and drone surveillance along popular subway surfing routes like the 7 Line and the J Line, the problem seems to be growing. Even Transit Chief Joseph Galata admitted that stopping the trend is proving difficult. "We're hitting social media hard," he said, putting out videos with parents, showing the effects. The effects? Let's talk about them. Shattered families, traumatized commuters, and kids with futures cut brutally short. MTA board members are now pushing for more than enforcement. They want outreach, education, real talk from real people who teens will actually listen to. As board member David Jones put it, "You feel invulnerable at this time in your life. We have to have people in their world telling them, no, this is not the way." And maybe that's the heartbreaking core of this tragedy. It didn't happen because of hate or crime or malice. It happened because a kid wanted to feel alive, wanted to be seen, wanted to go viral. Mayor Eric Adams summed it up with a sobering truth. No post is worth your future. As for the family, they're left with memories of a bright young girl whose life ended far too soon. Friends lit candles, left notes, and posted tributes online. One message read, "Fly high, angel. You were too bold, too beautiful for this world." And while her story ends in heartbreak, maybe it can also be a warning, a message louder than the rumble of any train. You don't have to risk your life to matter. You already do. It was a quiet Saturday night in Nashville, Tennessee. Inside the Radley home, everything changed after 9:58 p.m. That was when a panicked 911 call pierced the stillness. Deanne Radley's voice trembled on the line. A split second, a sound, a scream, the echo of a gunshot, and her world had changed. Her daughter, 13-year-old Diara Radley, was lying on the floor. Blood pooled around her. Deanne's hands shook as she dropped the phone, fell to her knees, and tried to undo the moment that had just unfolded before her eyes. She hadn't even seen the gun at first. It had been buried in her purse, wedged between makeup, receipts, and her keys. A .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol, loaded and unholstered. She was just digging for her keys. That's all. Then came the crack of the gunshot, the scream, the blood. Diara was right beside her, and in one tragic instant she was gone. First, responders rushed to the scene and tried everything to save her, but the wound was too severe. She was taken to Vanderbilt's pediatric emergency room. She didn't make it. The horror of what had happened settled into Deanne like a weight she couldn't lift. Later, she would tell reporters that she didn't even know the gun was loaded, that she had never imagined something like this could happen. But now the unimaginable had become her reality. She turned to social media, her grief pouring out in raw, unfiltered pain. "I lost my baby," she wrote. Words can't describe it. In one heart-wrenching video, she sat in the back seat of a car, her cheeks streaked with tears. Her voice broke again and again as she spoke to the camera, not for sympathy, but from a place of sorrow so deep it barely had words. "I want her back," she whispered. "I just want her back." The Radley family wasn't prepared for this. Deanne started a GoFundMe to help with the costs, explaining that Diara had been accidentally shot and she didn't have insurance for burial expenses. She thanked those who gave anything, because in moments like this, every bit of kindness feels like a lifeline. By Monday, only a few $100s had been raised toward their $15,000 goal. The grief was heavy, unrelenting. Deanne tried to make sense of it in news interviews, but how do you explain something like this? How do you say, "I killed my daughter by mistake"? She told the world her heart was broken in a million pieces, that she felt empty, that no parent should ever bury their child, and that no one can understand the pain until they've lived it. And Diarra? She was so much more than a headline. She had an angelic voice, the kind that lingered in a room after she left it. She loved to dance, to make her friends laugh, to sing like no one was listening. She cared deeply for her family. She loved school. Her presence was a light, and now that light had been extinguished far too soon. A gun, unholstered, a moment of carelessness, a split-second decision that can't be undone. As the investigation continues, the Nashville Police Department's Youth Services Division is looking into every detail. As of now, no charges have been filed. But even if they are, there's no punishment worse than what Deanne is already living with. On the morning of August 15th, 2023, William Jason Lamont Bell Sr. and his family were on a road trip from Chicago to Kentucky. What should have been an exciting journey took an unexpected and tragic turn when their vehicle got a flat tire along the busy interstate in northwest Indiana. It was late in the morning when the family's car came to a halt on the side of the road, and Bell Sr. stepped out to change the tire. His 15-year-old son, William Jason Lamont Bell Jr., was right behind him, eager to lend a hand. It was a father-son moment, something simple, something routine, but what happened next would change everything. As they worked to replace the tire, disaster struck without warning. A semi-truck, traveling in the same direction, suffered a mechanical failure. In the blink of an eye, one of the truck's rear wheels detached, rolling off the vehicle. With its tires still attached, the wheel careened down the highway, bouncing off the barrier wall and directly into the path of Bell Jr. and 4 others who were outside the vehicle. The impact was immediate and devastating. Police were quickly dispatched to the scene, and Bell Jr. was rushed to a nearby hospital for urgent care. However, his injuries were so severe that doctors determined they needed to transfer him to a hospital in Chicago, where he could receive more specialized care. Bell Jr. was placed on life support, clinging to life as his family hoped against hope. Sadly, after 3 agonizing days, on August 18, 2023, Bell Jr. passed away. His death left a hole in his family that could never be filled. Though the other 4 individuals involved in the accident sustained injuries, they were fortunate that their wounds were not life-threatening. The semi-truck driver was sent to a local hospital for a mandatory toxicology test. While authorities did not suspect drugs or alcohol played a role in the crash, the truck was impounded by state police for further inspection. They needed to understand how a simple road trip had turned into a nightmare, with a malfunction leading to the loss of a young life. For Bell Sr. and his family, the grief was overwhelming. A road trip meant to be filled with laughter and bonding had ended in heartbreak. Their son was gone, taken too soon by an accident no one could have predicted. The family now faced the painful journey of trying to heal from an unimaginable loss, forever carrying with them the memory of that tragic day. It was a typical Monday rush hour in Queens, commuters hustling home, earbuds in, and eyes glued to their phones. For 48-year-old Heriberto Quintana, it seemed like just another routine stop at the Roosevelt Avenue Jackson Heights station. Maybe he was thinking about dinner, maybe just eager to get home. Either way, he had no idea this would be his last subway ride. As the clock ticked toward 4:45 p.m., the station was packed with New Yorkers doing what New Yorkers do best, minding their business and hoping the train wasn't delayed. Heriberto was standing on the northbound F train platform when the unexpected happened. A verbal spat with another man escalated fast. Now, we all know subway scuffles are basically part of the NYC starter pack. Elbow room? Rare? Personal space? Non-existent. But what began as words quickly spiraled into a full-blown physical altercation with a 50-year-old man. No one knows what started it. Was it an accidental bump, a dirty look, or the age-old headphone volume dispute? The cause is still fuzzy, but within seconds, chaos erupted on the platform. As the train barreled into the station, tragedy struck. Heriberto either slipped or was pushed, and he fell off the platform and onto the tracks. In front of dozens of horrified commuters, he was struck by the incoming train. Screams echoed through the underground tunnel as panicked witnesses called 911. Within minutes, NYPD and emergency crews swarmed the scene. What they found was grim. Heriberto was discovered pinned beneath the train, suffering from severe trauma. He was immediately transported to Elmhurst Hospital Center, but sadly, it was too late. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The exact details of how Heriberto fell, whether it was a tragic misstep or a fatal shove, remained unclear. The man involved in the fight was taken into custody, but police were still piecing together what happened. There was no immediate indication of intent, and as the investigation continued, questions hung in the air. Meanwhile, subway service across Queens descended into chaos. Several lines experienced delays for hours. As crews worked the scene and investigators gathered evidence, photos of the incident site flooded social media, showing yellow police tape, emergency lights, and stunned passengers trying to process what had just happened. What makes this case so bizarre isn't just the horror of the moment, but the randomness of it all. Two men meet on a platform. A moment of tension flares up, and in less than a minute, one of them is dead. No robbery, no weapons, just a split-second scuffle in the wrong place at the worst possible time. Videos of the aftermath went viral online, sparking fierce debates about subway safety, mental health, and the unpredictable tension that simmers beneath New York's streets. Some called for more law enforcement presence, others for better platform barriers, anything to prevent another senseless tragedy like this one. But behind the headlines and hashtags was a man who mattered. Heriberto Quintana was a Queens resident, a father, and a neighbor. His family later spoke out, describing him as kind, hardworking, and someone who never went looking for trouble. He didn't deserve this, his cousin told reporters. He just wanted to get home like everyone else. And that's the haunting part. He could have been any of us. In a city that never sleeps and barely pauses, Heriberto's story is a chilling reminder that life can change, or end in a blink. Yet, even in that darkness, his loved ones held on to hope that his story would lead to safer platforms and better protections for millions who ride the rails every day. Rest in peace, Heriberto. Your ride may have ended, but your story rolls on. It was the evening of June 5th, 2024, in Darlington County, Durham. A night that began with laughter, warmth, and the smell of home-cooked spaghetti. The Vickers family, Simon, his partner Sarah, and their 14-year-old daughter Scarlett, were all in the kitchen together just like any ordinary family winding down for the night. Sarah stirred the pot while Simon and Scarlett playfully tossed random objects at each other, their laughter bouncing off the kitchen walls. It was the kind of simple, silly moment you'd never expect to turn into a tragedy. But something changed. By 11 p.m., flashing blue lights lit up Geneva Road. Emergency services were rushing toward a scene they never wanted to see. Inside that same kitchen, now quiet and soaked in shock, Scarlett lay on the floor with a deep wound in her chest. Paramedics fought to save her, but her injuries were too severe. The 14-year-old girl, full of life just minutes before, was gone. Simon Vickers told police it was a terrible, horrible accident. He said they were joking around, just playing. And somehow, in the middle of it all, he threw a knife. He didn't mean to hurt her. He didn't even realize what would happen. That's what he claimed. But something didn't add up. Scarlett's wound was clean, deep, 11 centimeters straight into her heart. Forensic pathologist Dr. Jennifer Bolton didn't mince words. This wasn't the kind of injury a thrown knife would make. It was too precise, too deliberate. The blade had pierced her pajama top, sliced through a lung, and hit her heart. The kind of damage that only happens when a knife is held with force, not tossed playfully. Simon admitted he'd had 4 glasses of wine that evening. He'd also smoked cannabis. Still, he insisted, no malice, no intent. Just a tragic mistake. Sarah, her voice cracking under the weight of grief, backed him, said it was just roughhousing gone wrong. But the science told another story. Forensic scientist Gemma Escott examined the knife and what she found pointed to something darker. The wound didn't match Simon's version of events. It wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a joke gone wrong. It was a stabbing. At trial, Simon stuck to his story. He painted that night as lighthearted, normal. He said he loved Scarlett more than anything in the world. But the prosecution hammered down piece by piece, showing how the evidence contradicted everything he said. Scarlett's final hours were normal. She even posted a TikTok just before it all happened. Smiling in her mirror, she captioned it, "Ignore the mess, please." No one knew it would be her last post. The jury took 13 hours. When the verdict came, it hit like a punch to the gut. Guilty. His version of events was rejected. The court believed what the evidence had shown all along. This wasn't an accident. This was intentional. Simon Vickers was sentenced to life in prison, but the question still lingers. Why? There were no signs, no history of violence, no whispers of family trouble, not a single red flag that might have warned what was coming. Detective Superintendent Craig Rudd said it best. Only Simon knows what really happened in that moment, and maybe he'll never say. Scarlett's mother, Sarah, was left in ruins. In a quiet, devastating statement, she said her grief felt unreal. She couldn't understand how her world had shattered in seconds, her only child gone. The community mourned. Friends, classmates, teachers, everyone who knew Scarlett remembered her as kind, respectful, full of promise. A life filled with potential, ripped away in a flash. For Delree Rosario and her sister Marissa Woods, hitting the gym was more than just a habit. It was a part of their daily rhythm. Nearly every day, they laced up their sneakers and headed to the LA Fitness Center in Kent, Washington, ready to push themselves, to sweat, to feel that familiar burn as they ran on the treadmill. It was their time to reset, to focus, to let the stress of the world melt away. But on July 21st, 2023, that familiar routine took a devastating, unthinkable turn. One moment, Rosario was running, her feet pounding against the belt of the treadmill, her breath steady. The next, her world tilted, literally. Something went wrong. Maybe it was just a misstep. Maybe the treadmill malfunctioned. No one could say for sure. What is certain is that Rosario, a healthy, active 36-year-old, lost her balance as she attempted to slow the machine down. In a horrifying instant, she stumbled forward, her momentum working against her, and her head slammed into the front of the treadmill. The impact was brutal. The force knocked her off the machine, sending her crumpling to the gym floor. Marissa watched in horror as her sister collapsed. At first, she thought Delree would stir, shake it off, get back up, but she didn't. Panic surged through Marissa as she dropped to her knees, calling out her sister's name, shaking her, willing her to respond. But there was nothing, no movement, no sign of consciousness. A terrible, suffocating fear settled in. Marissa screamed for help, her voice rising above the hum of gym equipment and idle conversations. People turned. Some ran over. But, according to Marissa, none of the LA Fitness staff stepped forward to help. Not one of them performed CPR. Not one of them seemed to know what to do. It was strangers, fellow gym-goers who stepped in to assist. But by then, precious minutes had slipped away. The paramedics arrived as quickly as they could, pushing through the gym, equipment forgotten, people frozen in shock. They worked swiftly, lifting Rosario, stabilizing her, racing against time. Marissa could do nothing but follow, her heart pounding, her mind reeling. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was just another normal day, just another workout. At the hospital, the waiting was unbearable. Hours stretched into eternity. Marissa and her family clung to hope, desperately willing Rosario to wake up, to open her eyes, to squeeze someone's hand. But she never did. The doctors delivered the news no one wanted to hear. Delree Rosario was gone. The weight of the loss was crushing. How could someone so full of life, someone so strong, be gone in an instant? The shock of it all made it impossible to process. It didn't feel real. It didn't make sense. The gym, the place that had been a source of energy, strength, and routine, had become the site of unimaginable tragedy. Yet, even in the depths of their grief, something extraordinary happened. Delree Rosario had always been someone who gave without hesitation. She was the kind of person who would drop everything to help a friend, who would offer a warm smile to a stranger, who believed in kindness above all else, and even in death she continued to give. As an organ donor, Rosario saved the lives of 5 people, 5 individuals who had been clinging to hope, waiting for a miracle. Her heart, lungs, kidneys, and liver were transplanted, giving them a second chance at life. People she had never met, people she would never know, were given the most precious gift of all because of her. For her family, it was both a comfort and a heartbreak. Rosario was gone, but she wasn't truly lost. A part of her still lived on, beating in another's chest, breathing in another's lungs, carrying her legacy forward. The tragedy of that day would never fade. The questions would never fully be answered. But one thing remained undeniable. Rosario's spirit, her love, her generosity, had outlived her final breath. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Astoria, one of those breezy New York days where the sun hits just right between the rows of low-rise buildings and elevated train tracks. For 31-year-old William Olbris, everything seemed normal. He blended in with the crowd on the Manhattan-bound N train platform at Broadway and 31st Street, just another strap hanger waiting for his ride. But what happened next would turn that ordinary day into something disturbingly unforgettable. Eyewitnesses say William stood calmly, eyes fixed on the horizon as the train approached. Nothing seemed out of place until he walked toward the first car, bent down, and did something that made hearts stop. He placed his wallet gently on the platform. Then, without hesitation, he jumped. The southbound N train roared into the station at just the wrong second. A sickening thud echoed through the air, silencing the usual screeches and hums of rush hour. Onlookers screamed. Some froze. A few turned away. The impact was so brutal that parts of William's body fell onto the street below the elevated tracks. It was sudden, shocking, and undeniably gruesome. Emergency crews from the NYPD and FDNY rushed to the scene within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. William Olbris was pronounced dead instantly. Cleanup and investigation forced the N line to shut down temporarily, leaving confused commuters stuck and station workers visibly shaken. Police didn't find a note, but the wallet he left behind seemed to say everything. It was almost like he wanted to be found, to be identified, to make sure someone knew it wasn't an accident. But that's not even the strangest part. Roughly 30 minutes before the jump, William posted one final, cryptic tweet. "It's time to pay the price." Attached was a short, bizarre 15-second video. Blurry, shaky footage of what might have been a train platform. Quick cuts, dim lighting, and eerie silence. It gave off the kind of unsettling vibes that leave you with goosebumps and more questions than answers. No manifesto, no farewell message, just those 6 haunting words in a glitchy video that quickly went viral. The internet did what it always does: speculated, dissected, theorized. Was he battling something? Was it a statement? Or just a final, fragmented cry for help? What makes William's death so bizarre isn't just how it happened. It's the deliberate buildup, the eerie foreshadowing, and the eerie calmness before the tragedy. Most suicides come with warning signs. William gave the world one final puzzle to piece together. His family later broke their silence. Through tears, they described William as creative, sensitive, and always deep in thought. "An artist of emotion," one cousin said. They said he struggled silently and hoped his story would open conversations about mental health, especially among young men. So, what began as an ordinary afternoon ended with a haunting tragedy and a powerful reminder. Even in a crowded city of millions, some people feel completely alone. Rest easy, William. You mattered more than you knew. It was April 25, 2017, in the quiet town of Myerstown, Pennsylvania. A calm night turned into a scene no parent ever wants to face. In a house filled with the chaos and laughter of toddlers, something irreversible had happened. Ian Francis Dwyer was found lifeless in his crib, and the truth behind his death would break hearts and ignite outrage. Born on Christmas Day in 2014, Ian arrived alongside his identical twin sisters, Avery and Ciela. The triplets came a little early, and while Ian needed some help breathing at first, he quickly grew strong enough to go home. His parents, Justin Dwyer and Courtney Stash, were overjoyed. 3 tiny bundles of life all at once. A dream, but also a storm of exhaustion, noise, and sleepless nights. And Ian, he was clever, adventurous, a toddler with a spark in his eye. He kept climbing out of his crib, over and over again. No matter how they adjusted things, no matter how much they scolded or pleaded, he'd find a way out. They feared he might hurt himself in the process. But instead of seeking safer solutions, like switching to a toddler bed or asking for help, Justin and Courtney made a decision that would haunt them forever. They trapped him. That night, desperate to keep Ian inside the crib, they placed a mattress over the top, then used bungee cords to hold it down. As if that wasn't enough, they stacked 50-pound bags of rock salt on top of it to make sure it stayed. The idea was to protect him, but what they'd done was build a cage, a deadly one. Sometime during the night, Ian tried once more to climb out, but this time he didn't make it. The mattress, heavy and unyielding, collapsed under the weight of the rock salt. It pinned him inside. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't call for help. He died alone in the dark, in the very crib meant to keep him safe. By the time his parents found him, it was already too late. They called 911, but the silence that followed told the whole story. At first, they didn't tell authorities about the mattress. They didn't mention the cords, or the rock salt, or the desperate logic behind their fatal mistake. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and it came from a child. Ian's 8-year-old half-brother spoke up. He told investigators what he'd seen, what he'd overheard, that his parents had rigged the crib, that they'd talked about how the mattress had suffocated his little brother. Soon, everything unraveled. An autopsy confirmed what many feared. Ian died of suffocation, slowly, helplessly. Not because of illness or accident, but because of a reckless choice made out of fear and frustration. Justin and Courtney had been so focused on control, on stopping the escape, that they ignored the danger they were creating. They were arrested, charged with involuntary manslaughter, aggravated assault, and endangering the welfare of a child. Prosecutors didn't hold back. They argued that their actions weren't just careless, they were deadly, and the evidence agreed. What if they'd just moved him to a toddler bed? What if they had asked for help, called a pediatrician, anything but this? Would Ian still be here, laughing, eating, growing? Could one moment of pause have changed everything? Now, instead of bedtime routines and storybooks, this family lives with unbearable silence. The loss of a child is crushing, but knowing it could have been prevented, that's a different kind of grief, one that never lets go. For Tom Josie, a routine dental appointment should have been just that, routine. At 60 years old, the Antioch, Illinois resident had sat in the dentist's chair more times than he could count. A simple tooth filling wasn't something to be nervous about. But what started as an ordinary visit on March 18, 2022, quickly spiraled into something out of a medical thriller, one that would land him in the hospital and leave doctors scrambling for a solution. Everything seemed fine at first. The dentist worked carefully, the drill buzzing as it smoothed out the damaged tooth. Then, out of nowhere, Josie felt the urge to cough. It was a split-second reflex, something he didn't think twice about until he realized something was wrong. He swallowed hard, feeling an odd sensation in his throat. That's when the dentist gave him the news no patient ever expects to hear. You just swallowed a drill bit. Josie's mind raced. How was that even possible? He hadn't felt anything sharp going down. But the truth was, a 1-inch, 2.5 centimeters long drill bit had completely vanished, right into his body. The question was, where had it gone? At first, everyone assumed it had simply ended up in his stomach, but when doctors at a local hospital took x-rays, there was no sign of the missing tool. A CT scan revealed the shocking truth. The drill bit had bypassed his digestive system entirely. Instead of swallowing it, he had inhaled it. The tiny metal piece had slipped deep into his right lung, settling in the lower lobe, a place that traditional medical scopes couldn't reach. That's when things got even more serious. Because of its location, doctors feared that if they couldn't retrieve the drill bit, They might have to remove part of Yossi's lung. Surgery was a last resort. But at that point, it was looking like the only option. The idea of losing a piece of his lung over a dental mishap was almost too surreal to process. Yossi was transferred to a specialized hospital in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where medical experts took on the unusual case. But traditional methods weren't going to cut it. The drill bit was wedged too deep, in a place where even the longest scopes couldn't safely reach. It was time to think outside the box. That's where Dr. Abdul Al-Reyes and Dr. Hasnain Bawadam came in. They had access to an advanced piece of medical technology, a robotic bronchoscopy system. Typically used for detecting lung cancer at its earliest stages, this specialized tool was far more flexible and precise than traditional scopes. If anything had a chance of reaching the drill bit without damaging Yossi's lung, this was it. With careful precision, the doctors guided the robotic scope through Yossi's narrow lung pathways, navigating carefully to avoid harming the delicate tissue. The process required patience, skill, and a steady hand. If anything went wrong, it could lead to severe complications. But after 90 tense minutes, the team successfully reached the drill bit and carefully extracted it, without making a single incision. When Yossi woke up, the relief was overwhelming. Not only had the surgery gone exactly as planned, but he had been able to avoid losing any part of his lung. Even better, he was allowed to go home that very same day. Now, instead of being buried inside his body, the infamous drill bit sits proudly on a shelf in his home. A bizarre but unforgettable souvenir of the day a dental appointment turned into a medical mystery. Looking back, Yossi can't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. A freak accident, a near miss with surgery, and a cutting-edge robotic procedure had all been part of his story. But most of all, he's just grateful to be breathing easy, literally. And as for the drill bit, well, let's just say he's keeping a much closer eye on dental tools from now on.